Good afternoon and welcome along to Destination Wellbeing. My guest this afternoon is Ingrid Darragh. You're very welcome to Destination Wellbeing and to our lovely new studio. So we've got a whole new image going out today, hopefully, and blending lovely. And thankfully, Ingrid and I, whether telepathically or what, had chosen different colours of my very closely or very nearly had a very similar dress on to Ingrid today. Yes. So we would have looked like twins.
We would have done.
So welcome along to Destination Wellbeing, and just a reminder, viewers, we will be touching around some health and wellbeing issues today. So always, whether it's emotional well-being, physical well-being, if you have any concerns at all, your first protocol being your GP, and just remembering to take ownership and responsibility for your own health and your own well-being. Of course, checking in with your doctor just to see what their opinions are, their views are. But as we go through today, Ingrid and myself will be chatting. I've had the pleasure of starting to read Ingrid's new book. I'm working my way through it, and it's literally that, it's a working your way through, because you've incorporated lots of different exercises. So we'll talk a wee bit more about Ingrid's book and really the whole area that Ingrid works on, which is as a relationship coach and emotional healer. So you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us on Destination Wellbeing today. You're very welcome.
Delighted to be here.
Good. I suppose it's an area that, for one of those places where our paths crossed, just as divine intervention can have it. And it's great to have you here today to share so much of your wisdom, because, as I said, even just touching on the book, I've started a lot of stuff that you kind of know yourself, but when you've pinpoint it, narrow it down and get it in the format that it's in Divine Love, then it all comes together, really, doesn't it?
Yes.
It works.
Yes. I kind of find that I was going through my own journey and learning about relationships and going through a divorce at a relatively young age, in my early 30s. But the other things that I wanted to put into the book were some practical exercises that people could do. I was fortunate that I was training as a life coach at the time, and I was learning so much. And I really wanted to put in some of the things that I came across that I found helpful. And the other thing that I wanted to bring into it were some client case studies. So as I was working with clients and seeing their story and their journey and their insights and how they were developing and learning, I put some client case studies in there as well. And then the other element to my work is really working spiritually with angels and guides and helpers in the spirit world. So sometimes I would receive messages and guidance from them when I'm meditating, so I wanted to put some of that in the book as well. Yeah. So it's a little bit of everything, really.
A bit of which I think is, and we've probably noticed as we've had different speakers on and different guests on Destination Wellbeing, a lot of the time that comes across that it's nearly a blended process, or a blended technique or a blended therapy, because often as therapists we study one area and we develop into another, and then it's when you bring them all together to kind of offer your own unique spin on it that allows you to attract clients in. So we've talked about, you mentioned their client case studies, and I think it's always great to be able to relate to the experiences of someone else, because they're never that million miles away from our own.
That's true.
There's only really a certain number of experiences that we can have in different ways, but we can always find something that can relate back. So
that's right. It's often the case that we'll be guided to a certain book or a teacher or a DVD or to attend a workshop, and that's the divine, as you said, it's the divine intervention, and it's the right time for us there's something in there that we need to learn. Yeah. And so we need to take the time and go to that class or read that book and see what we can learn from it, because it's really there as a beautiful blessing to us, to help us on our path. Like I've even had a story from a client who was traveling and was in the middle of nowhere in a hostel, and they were on their way to a healing course, and they prayed for some help. They were having a bit of a dark night of the soul, and they prayed for some help, and then they thought, well, I really don't know how I can get help. I'm in the middle of nowhere in this hostel. But they prayed anyway, and they let go of that part of us that needs to know how it's going to turn up. And they went into this little coffee room in the hostel, and there was a row of books on the shelf, and they lifted down a book and opened it, and on the page of the book was exactly what they were experiencing. So that was there to support them. So all we need to do is just open up to receiving and allowing that.
And I think one of the key points that you make there, and often can sometimes get missed when we're on our personal development journey, is the letting go of trying to figure it out. It's to trust that it will, and allowing it to evolve. And more, I suppose, very relevant in relationships, because often we put, well, I'm this age and I've got, I was speaking to a girl there not that long ago who has, 6 children, and she's recently separated, but quite young, and like that as well is sort of saying, but who's going to want me, type thing. And it's like, well, there is somebody, there is, when the time's right, that will happen, and but that's believing that there's no limits there, really.
That's right, and that can be our negative beliefs. So if we think there's nobody out there that's going to want to get together with me because of X, Y, and Z, in your friend's case, because I have 6 children, then that we will be limited by that belief, and then that will become our experience. So it was great that you were there to sort of challenge that belief a little bit for her and say, well, hang on a minute, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's true, and to challenge her a little bit and to look at that and maybe look at all the things that she has to offer to a potential partner. One of her gifts, I'm sure, is being a great mother.
Well, yes, and having, and that in itself has, we've all seen the resume that comes with motherhood and the skills and the talents that you need to be able to have there. So.
I kind of find myself in that situation myself. Going back 6 years ago, I had a relationship breakup, and my son was just a baby, and so I was a single parent. So somebody then that would come into my life, they weren't just taking on the relationship with me, they would be a potential step parent to my little boy, and it made me a little bit more conscious, I guess, and maybe a bit more protective of my little boy and the qualities then that I would be looking at in somebody who would potentially be like a stepfather figure to him. So and I noticed that I had a few of those limiting beliefs that I had to look at and release and dissolve those barriers, because that would then prevent somebody coming into my life. And of course there's lots of people out there who would be more than happy to be with the beautiful partner that they've always wanted to be with, and they also want to be a mom or a dad, so that's completely okay for them.
And it works, whereas, as you say, we can put the limits on, close it down, shut down from the awareness of that, and that in itself, as Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right.
That's right. I remember years ago I used to have a friend that used to say, there's no good men out there. So that was like her catchphrase.
And then the experience is created by that.
But of course there are wonderful partners out there, and so we have to sort of get out of our own way.
Yes, a lot of the time.
Around that.
I think that's one of the beauties of working with a coach. As you said, it was in my friend's case, it was helpful that I was there and able to sort of relate to that story, but for her to really move past that, it's getting somebody who can support her through that journey, and that's where the beauty of learning to trust a coach. And I suppose particularly for different areas, I mean, there are expert coaches who work on career side of things, there's expert coaches who work on the relationship side of things, it's getting the right person who fits with where you're at for yourself, isn't it, really?
That's
because I know you worked yourself sort of through your own journey and through your own healing in order to get to the place where you were as well.
Yeah, that's right. Like I had, I found myself in a situation sort of my late 20s, early 30s, and I had spent that part of my life achieving, and I was working in the corporate world and climbing the corporate ladder, so to speak, and achieving and pursuing certain goals. And I found myself in a very unhappy marriage, and also I wasn't really enjoying the job that I was doing anymore. It was in the IT world, and I remember having this feeling of you know, there must be more than this. It just felt very empty to me. And then not very long after having that realization, I found myself going through a separation, and I had been with that partner for 14 years, so we were childhood sweethearts. So for us to go through that process of separating and divorcing, it was a very stressful situation. And then, but I had an opportunity to leave the corporate world. And so I did. I chose to retrain as a life coach. So I left that environment. I moved, at the time I was living in Scotland, so I moved back to Northern Ireland to be near my family. And I studied part-time, and but then my health was actually going downhill. I had all sorts of health problems, and it took a while to get a diagnosis. But eventually, the GP that I saw was able to give me a correct diagnosis, and it was a growth at the base of the pituitary gland near the base of the brain. There was a growth there, which they called a tumour. Now, it wasn't a cancerous tumour, but I had to go for all sorts of tests and brain scans and things, and it was a pretty challenging time to go through the emotional upheaval of the divorce, and then the physical ailments with the illness and the ups and downs with that. And one of the symptoms of that would be high anxiety. So I was finding that I was in quite an anxious state at times, and I found it very hard to cope on a day-to-day basis with things that I would have found very easy before.
As you say, you were working through the corporate world, you were achieving, doing, and all so was going on. Yeah, and often, I suppose it's the link between our physical, our stresses and on all of that, and how that can emotionally impact us, and then in turn how it physically impacts the body.
Right.
So your body was really screaming out to you at that point, you know, something's got to change here.
It really was. You know, I remember back to that time, and I had very low energy. So I before I gave up my job, I would have worked from home so that I could have a little rest in the afternoon and then do a little bit of work at night to make up for that time, because I physically just found it very hard to get through the day. And you know, we hear a lot about people having adrenal burnout, and I'm convinced that I had that going on as well. Just, you know, many years of high stress and being on the go, working long hours and traveling. So there was probably some of that going on as well. So I was pretty exhausted, and then when I did get the diagnosis about the pituitary tumour, I was able to go on some medication, which did help. It helped to a certain degree, but then there was this kind of gap from where I was to what I used to be, and it was still quite a sizable gap. So I just sort of thought, okay, I need to learn how to heal and research and try out lots of different complementary therapies and things, and that sort of brought me on to trying Reiki and acupuncture. And I started to find that with both of those, that my energy levels would increase. So I thought, okay, I need to keep investigating this. And then over a period of years, I learned how to do Reiki and trained, and I'm now a Reiki teacher. And I was able to, you know, all through those times in my life, I was able to do treatments on myself. Before that, I went for acupuncture and paid for acupuncture every week, but of course then once I learned the Reiki, I could just do it on myself, so it actually saved me quite a bit of money.
Yeah, and that's the beauty. That's one of the beauties of Reiki is that you can treat yourself, and you can use it. It becomes part of your daily life, and you're just using it without sometimes even realizing that you're actually using it. And on the other side, though, I would find as well that the self-treatment is really, really good, and self-care and the empowerment that comes from being able to take control of your own health and your own well-being.
Very much so.
But there's always the nice side of having the support from in the coaching element and in the healing, the emotional healing perspective, where having someone to hold that space for you is equally as can be very therapeutic, depending on where you're at and what's going on. So
that's right.
It's a lovely balance. But for me, Reiki gives you the freedom to have the choice.
Yes.
You can be treated or you can treat yourself, and that's it's that beauty of having the two.
That helped a lot at that time.
Yes. And so you've pulled all of those skills together now through your own experience, which is always, I think, and certainly for me, when anybody is thinking about a therapist or deciding to go on a path, when the person has been through it themselves, it generally allows them to have a greater sense of empathy with the people that they're working with.
That's right. You know, having gone through the relationship breakup, the divorce, and then a period of physical illness, and then there's been other things happen a few years after that, like a bereavement, and it just means that if somebody comes in to see me and wants to work with me, and we do a session together, I'll have a bit of an idea of what they're going through because of the experiences that I've had, and that brings with it then, as you say, it brings in this empathy and this compassion that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So I wouldn't really have understood exactly what it was that they were going through.
And you spoke about the dark night of the soul type thing, and we go through life with different stages and different levels of that, where there's that where really sometimes we can feel that, you know, life's never going to be the same again, and what's going on here, and my world's crumbling around. But having all of those tools in the box, the Reiki, the EFT, coaching tools, all of those that all come in NLP, they all come in to form your own kind of nearly toolkit.
Yes,
and that's,
very much so. Very much so. And what I'm finding now is that they kind of blend together. Yeah. And so if I'm, you know, doing some work on a one-to-one basis with somebody, or in a group workshop, or on myself, because, you know, I still have stuff that comes up for me, and then I take some time out and I look at that to see what it is and process it. So I can't really call it just coaching or just EFT tapping, because there'll be like a blend of lots of things that come together. And what I tend to do is sort of just sit with the client and talk and understand what's going on for them, and then I'll get a feeling and an intuition about what we need to do next. So
what's going to be best for that person in that space to help them, I suppose, achieve what they're hoping to achieve from it. And so if somebody was at that stage of going through something and in the middle of something very challenging and traumatic, we might do something very, very gentle, like a hands-on Reiki treatment, and work with the energy and just help them to relax a little bit, rather than jumping in and starting to fix and find the solutions with the other techniques. So it really depends what's going on for them. And often I would find no two treatments are ever the same.
Yes, that's
you know,
true.
I mean, you've got this toolbox of tools and techniques and practices that you can use to help people, but when each treatment is tailored to suit the needs of the individual, that's where the real benefits and the real results come in, because there's no two people the same. So no two sets of experiences can be the same, or they can be similar. And as we talked about the case studies in your book, you know, people will be able to relate to those type of experiences. But ultimately, how I experience it will be very different to how you would experience the same thing. And so it all comes back to us as an individual, really.
That's right.
And so I suppose we've talked around what it is that you do, but specifically, why would someone decide to have a treatment, or why do you feel that maybe it's beneficial to people to look at how they relate to themselves, how they relate to others? And I know a lot of your book is around romantic love, but often relationships are, it's all of our relationships. It's how we react with family members, how we react with work colleagues. It's the whole area. So
very much so. I guess one of the benefits of working with a relationship coach is that there's somebody there who's like an observer, who can be objective. So they don't really have, they're not attached to an outcome for you. So if you have something going on in your life, I can be very objective. I'm not wanting, you know, a certain outcome for you, and then I can sort of sit back and be the observer and ask, I guess, insightful, hopefully ask insightful questions to see what's going on for you, to see what's important for you, to see what your values are. And then we quite often we would be having a look at where you might feel a bit stuck. And with me working with the energy body as well as the mind with the coaching, we would maybe have a look at where you might be holding that energy in the body, that stuckness. And we would really start from there and allow that energy to express and see what is that about. Is that about maybe a past hurt or a past situation in your life, maybe a previous relationship? Because I am a relationship coach, my clients tend to come to me for that rather than the general coaching. And then that can even go right back to childhood. So there could be a childhood experience which has then formed what you might call like a negative belief. And then we would actually look at that belief and take that apart and dissolve it, and then we would bring you back into like a resourceful state again. So one of the areas that I find that that clients come to me for is so that they can actually progress through something challenging in a much more quicker timescale than if they worked through it on their own. And by that I mean sometimes we can have our beliefs such that we form from childhood and maybe bring in to early adulthood and into relationships with us. And unless we take some time to really step back from that and to learn from that situation, so that relationship maybe then would end, unless we take some time to really become conscious of, well, what did I learn from that? What would I maybe want to do differently next time? How can I change and grow as a person? So those are some of the things that I would be asking people, and of course then there's some exercises in the book that can help with that, so that then that person isn't going to go out and be attracted to the same kind of relationship again.
Because that's often where we repeat patterns until we learn the lesson, but so taking the time out to identify the lesson is
that can just help so much.
And change the dynamics in every direction, really, Kat.
Very, very much so. So
So
that would be one of the areas that people find is helpful for them. The other one would be, I might be able to observe some behaviors that's going on for a client, like are they maybe playing it a little bit safe or settling for something, so that then if it doesn't work out, then they're not going to get too hurt. So people do various things like that, and I've done it in the past. I have to hold my hand up a little bit and say, sometimes we do these things, and unless we just step back and try to be a little bit conscious of that, because of course then if that happens, what's going on for us there is that we're not getting to connect in with this very deep love that we're talking about here. And we're only going to get the surface of it. We're not going to get the depth and the intimacy and the connection that we could really have.
So, and exploring I suppose our relationship with relationships and our relationship with ourselves is, I feel, a very useful exercise for everybody to do, whilst it might seem like something that's important for, or is on the, I suppose, top of the agenda maybe for somebody who's single or who's looking for a new relationship. But even in existing relationships, or when relationships have gotten maybe stagnant, or at the crux of, do we hold on, do we let it go, what's best here? It's all of those areas that examining and having that support can be really, really beneficial for.
Very, very much so.
It's because, and ultimately then, even if we're not in a romantic relationship with someone else, we're always in a relationship with ourselves.
Exactly.
And it's how do I honour myself? And one of the things that struck me as you were chatting there was, at the end of a relationship, sort of evaluating it and looking at it and seeing what have I learnt, what could I do differently? Is again quite an empowering thing, because often relationships end and we feel victimised. It's all about what the other person did or didn't do, or if only they'd done this, or if only, whereas, and that leaves you quite stuck and quite victimised, really. Even if it's not hasn't been a particularly abusive relationship or anything like that, where there's a real sense of being a victim, but even in a relationship that ends reasonably okay, or has been reasonably
Yes.
happy enough
Yes.
through, then there's still, at the end point, there's still this, if only they'd done this, or if only they'd done that.
Yes,
Whereas
that's
when we look,
true.
and we can never change anyone else. So
That's
it's
right.
that.
And as you say, it really starts from within, and it is about us. And one of the core things there would be to have a look at how good is our level of self-love and our self-esteem. And there's various techniques in the book that we use to have a look at that, and suggestions on how to boost our levels of self-love and self-esteem. And as we do that, and we have strong boundaries then about how we want somebody to treat us, then we can attract in a loving partner. And so that would be one of the things that we would spend some time looking at. But the other thing that you mentioned there was about, there can be a tendency when a relationship ends to look at the other person and to see, what did they do, what did they not do. It's all their fault.
And blame.
And
Totally.
And again, we've all done a little bit of that in the past. But, where a coach would come in, I remember back years ago when I was doing my life coaching course, I was learning to always look within. So whatever was going on out here was actually about in here.
A reflection of whatever you believed or
Yes.
didn't believe or
Yes.
or whatever was going on.
Yes.
And those patterns repeat themselves in all areas of
They
our
will,
lives.
they will.
And you mentioned as well about the healthy boundaries, and what boundaries am I setting for myself, what's
Yes.
acceptable, what's not acceptable,
Yes.
and how can I assert those. And then the other side of that coin is, and again, I think a lot of us have probably been there as well, is where those boundaries are nearly too strong and we're too protective of ourselves and
Yes.
not allowing. So there's a whole
that can
mix of
happen.
stuff that can be explored.
That can happen, and if somebody has been through, a particularly difficult breakup or relationship where they've been hurt, and quite often people have, what they can do then is to become protective and sort of start to put up walls, start to have some, covering up, and they're not really opening up as fully as they could. They're being very cautious.
And I think some of that can also, when you mentioned about going back to childhood as well, where very often it's not even so much the romantic relationship hurt, but it could be maybe parental
Yes.
hurt, and
Yes.
maybe where that relationship hasn't been as healthy as what we would like it to be. So
That can be true, yeah.
And again,
Yep.
the child within learns to protect itself, and that
Yes,
that can go through.
That can happen, and so there are lots of different things in the book about that, and then I also work with people and help them to look at that, because unless we took the time out to look at it, we wouldn't really be aware of what some of our beliefs are.
And or where they came from in
yes.
order to change them, because I think it's when you realise what they are and what caused them, then you realise, well, actually,
Yes.
I'm 28 now, or I'm 30 now, or I'm 40 now, and I'm not 6, and I don't need
Yes.
to be protecting myself.
That's
like
right.
the 6-year-old. I've got a different set of resources here now.
That's right. That's right.
But I know also that you're recently, for anybody who is maybe would like to access Ingrid's book and also some of her wonderful programs, you've recently launched a webinar,
Yes.
or due to launch a webinar
Yes.
program, which is a fantastic way of, because I have a friend whose famous saying is knowing and doing are two different things, and sometimes we can take time out to read the book and do different things, but we don't actually take the time to do the work.
Yes.
And it's the work that yields the results. I mean,
That's right.
I can read a manual on how to drive a racing car, but that doesn't mean I've ever driven one. Or whatever, you can read all of the manuals, and you can talk, you can do all of the theory, but it's putting the theory into practice.
Yes, that's right.
Is where the benefit, and that's what I love about the idea of webinars. Whether that's, again, relationship related, career related, diet related, it's getting the support around that a webinar now, the beauty of the internet allows us to have.
It's a great way of reaching more people. So I would set up the dates and the times, and then people can join the webinar by phone or by Skype or by their PC, and then we would work through all the various things in the book. So as well as reading the book and doing the exercises, they have that support from me on the webinar for the group, we would do some guided meditations. We would do some of the exercises from the book. We would do some coaching, so some group coaching or some one-to-one coaching where somebody would volunteer and bring like a real life situation that they are dealing with. And then I would do some work with them with the coaching, the energy work, the EFT tapping. And so people are, it's a beautiful way of reaching people. And they can dial in from anywhere, so it's not like they have to jump on a plane to come to be somewhere. And I find as well, sometimes the webinars are good for mums because they can actually replay it when the kids are in bed at night.
Whenever it suits,
You know,
or busy,
so-
busy wherever you're,
yeah.
busy single professionals who maybe, I know you mentioned travelling a lot, and in the past I've done that and done loads of webinar stuff in hotels in the evening because a lot of my learning was done through that because you've got that space at that time. So it's great.
Yeah.
Well, all very exciting, and I'm certainly thoroughly enjoying your book and would highly recommend at least wherever you are, sort of examining your own relationship with yourself first and foremost, and then how you're interacting with people. And if there's a part of you that feels that, like, you know, my relationships, whether that's with family, work colleagues, romantic partners, aren't where I would like them to be, then it's really worth getting the support of a coach. And it doesn't have to be lots of sessions or anything. Even, you know, 3 or 4 sessions can really cause a lot of a great breakthrough.
It can,
and give you great insight to yourself really as well. So I'd like to thank you for joining us this afternoon, Ingrid, and we're nearly on, I'm sure we're probably slightly over our time now at this, but we're nearly there, and it has flew.
Hasn't it?
It definitely has.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, and your beautiful energy at just compassion for people and for life and
Thank you, Joanne.
and for love.
Likewise, thank you so much.
And thank you to our viewers for watching in. And if this is your first time watching Destination Wellbeing, there's lots of other shows and topics that we've covered over the last number of months, so do check some of them out, because really some very insightful information available through the valio.ie/Destination Wellbeing. And I also join Rowan on his Destination Uri morning show every Thursday morning, sharing some other wisdom and insights, so hopefully we'll have you tuning in to some of those as well. Thank you very much,
Thank
Ingrid,
you, Joanne.
and thank you to our viewers.
Thank you.